in some sense, monotheism is a rebellion against a certain faith system and a certain political system. And therefore, maybe a better way to understand monotheism is try to understand, first of all, what is the nature of the system that monotheism is going against. And I don't want to speak now historically, what are the roots of paganism, and but what I want to offer is how the Bible understands idolatry. What's the interpretation of the Bible to that phenomena? And once we understand that, maybe we'll be able to understand monotheism, which is an attempt to rebel against that phenomena. And to do that, I want to introduce a prophet called Habakkuk. I'm willing to bet money that no one here has ever read Habakkuk before. You have to teach it. Okay, I'm not willing to bet money. What? You met Habakkuk. You met Habakkuk himself. That's impressive. Okay. And he's a prophet that he had a vision of the Kasdim, the Babylonians, that are going to come and create a tremendous empire, a vicious empire, a cruel empire. And then he had his impulse about their religious intuition of the Kasdim, which are the Babylonians. I want to follow just very quickly the insight that Habakkuk has about the Kasdim, because I think his insight about the Kasdim could offer us an insight about monotheism. So it's you have it in page 1 and 2. The verses I'm looking for I'd like to read from verse 6. And I'll read it in Hebrew, and feel free to follow me either in Hebrew in the original or in the translation you have in front of you. כי הנני מקים את הכסדים הגוי המר והנמהר ההולך למרחבי ארץ לרשת משכנות לא. The Kasdim are coming, and they have a purpose to conquer a lot of land. But then he says something interesting, land that is not theirs. This might be one of the first times in history that there is an idea that you can violate an international law. That there's boundaries that you can't cross and you're not allowed to cross. That the land doesn't belong to the person who conquers it, meaning it doesn't belong to the powerful, it belongs to whoever lives there. Lareshet mishkenot lo. In modern eyes, this is so trivial. In ancient eyes, this is the beginning of a revolution. Ayom v'nora'u mimeno. I'm in verse 7. Mishpato v'se'eto yetze. I'm in verse 8 now. וקלו מנמרים סוסיו, וחדו מזה הווי עורב, ופעו פרשיו, ופרשיו מרחוק יבואו, יעופו כנשר חש לאכול. It's a very efficient army, and it's especially a speedy army. It's light. It could get very far very quickly. כולו לחמאס יבוא, מגמת פניהם קדימה, ויאסוף כחול שבי. כולו לחמאס יבוא. What is Hamas? Well, we know what Hamas means today. What? Yeah. Well, I guess Hamas was always a bad thing. But Hamas, yeah, it's violation of the most basic ethical standards. כולו לחמאס יבוא, ויאסוף כחול שבי, meaning he's going to collect prisoners like sand. is going to lock a lot of people up. Obviously, once he captures powerful people, he will humiliate them, because part of the pride of kings is humiliating other kings. There's nothing that can stop him. He mocks any obstacle. Tell now, what kind of a portrait of the painting of the Kasdim? Irresistible, powerful, omnipotent, and cocky. Nothing can stop them. And they know that nothing can stop them. There's a portrait of a nation of hubris. I'm skipping to verse 40 now. ותעשה אדם כדגי ים כרמס לא מושל בו. The Kasdim are coming, and now he asks us to imagine them as a big fishing boat, and the rest of humanity are fish, and he's now fishing humanity. I think it's a powerful metaphor. כרמס לא מושל בו. כולו בחכה האלה, I'm in verse 50 now, meaning he's fishing human beings and nations. יגורהו בחרמו ויאספהו במכמרתו, על כן ישמח ויגיל. This is an important verse that describes how they're joyful, how happy they are after their military achievements, after they managed to conquer the world and capture the people like fishermen. But it says like this, and he uses two words to describe their fishing. It's not. But what they have is the net, and the net is called cherem and michmoret. Okay, that's what they use to capture fish, and I assume that in the metaphor, what they use to capture human beings are their weapons. That's what they're talking about. They have great weapons that they use the image of the net to capture human beings, to control history, to control humanity. Now this is the next verse. Verse 16 is why I wanted to read Chavakuk this morning. Al ken yezabeach lecharmo v'yakter lemichmarto. He worships his weapons. He worships the net. This is the metaphor. He worships the net he used to capture, to fish humanity. That's how Chavakuk understands the rituals of the Kasdim. Now try to think about this again. So what is the essence of the rituals of the Kasdim according to this great prophet, the Chavakuk? What is it? What are you worshiping? You're worshiping, it's about idolatry, understands Chavakuk, is a very sophisticated technique of worshiping yourself. You're worshiping your power, which we always identify as an extension of ourself. You're worshiping your achievements. You're idealizing what you've achieved, and you do it through, and you channel it to what represents your power. That's idolatry, according to Chavakuk. There's another great prophet, I don't want to go into him now, Isaiah. And how does Isaiah understand idolatry? He says the following many, many times, the people, mishtachaveh lema'aseh yedecha. When you bow down to what you've created, that's idolatry. Idolatry is a sophisticated technique for us to surrender not to something that's beyond us, but to ourselves. And therefore, this form of idolatry, who's always seduced? I think the Bible offers a few forms of idolatry, a few psychological forms of idolatry, but this form of idolatry, who's always seduced to fall into this form of idolatry? The successful. When you're blinded by your success, you start worshiping your own power. The successful. You start believing that you're omnipotent, that you have no boundaries. Now, here's what I want to start thinking about what religion is about and what religion could be about. Religion, there's a great writer about religion, Karen Armstrong. Maybe many of you read her works about religion. She picks up on insights of William James, which me and Rabbi Wiss admire together, and Rudolf Otto. And she offers a following metaphor for what religion is. She said religion is not a faith. It's not a ritual. It's a talent. It's a talent. It's a talent. Now, there's some people that are more talented and some people that are less. Now, it's a certain talent that you have to cultivate. We could get better in religion. It's a talent. Now, it's a talent for what? Just like you have people that are talented musicians and they could create certain voices that no one can. And you have people that are talented, that they're athletes. They could do things with their body that no one can. No one can. There's also people that are religious athletes, that they could sense things, feel things, that most of us can rarely tap into those capabilities. And some people are more talented. And here's what religion is about. Religion is an attempt to cultivate that talent. That's where we practice that talent. It's a talent for what, says Rudolf Otto? It's a talent for the ability to sense that there's something greater than you in this world. Something that you can't understand, something that you can't feel. It's something beyond you. If that's religion, well, here we have an anti-religious impulse in Chavakuk. It's not about somehow escaping from yourself, sensing that there's something out there that's greater than you. You can't understand it, you can't feel it, but still you sense it, and some people sense it powerfully. Most of us hardly sense it. Myself, I'm kind of crippled. And religion is about working on this and sensing this. But idolatry is something else we have in our own soul. Is the opposite impulse. It's that attempt not to escape yourself and surrender to something that's greater than you and sense the presence of something that's greater than yourself. But it's about only sensing yourself. It's about being absorbed in yourself, which leads to admiring your own world. Which takes me to start thinking now, what is monotheism about? If religion is a talent, and it's a talent to sense something that's beyond, what is that? What is the alternative to paganism? What is monotheism about? And I'd like to introduce the way Yechezkel Koifman, a very important and prominent Jewish thinker in the 20th century, understood what Zionism is about as opposed to paganism. Am I saying paganism right? Yeah. Okay. I'm saying, maybe I'm not getting it. Okay, fine. Okay.
You just said Zionism.
I said Zionism.
Yeah.
Did I say Zionism is paganism?
No.
I don't think so. Yechezkel Koifman. Koifman. Kaufman.
Chicago Press, 1 volume, translated by Moshe Grieber.
Yeah, you got it. Actually, he wrote, okay. Yeah, so I said Zionism. So first of all, interesting Freudian slip. I hope, yeah. I don't think Zionism is monotheism either. But there's too many isms in our conversation. It's very confusing, yeah. No more isms. Thank you. So I understand monotheism is not about believing that God is one. That's not what the revolution was about. That wasn't the dramatic paradigm shift that humanity went through from believing in that there are many gods, and then one day a small group declares that there's only one God. It's not a mathematical miracle that we shrunk the amount of gods from many to one. That's not what Zionism is about. No, but you injected it in my psyche. That's okay. No, I'm speaking about Zionism all day long lately, so it's maybe I should move to monotheism. Monotheism is not about shrinking the amount of gods. It's about understanding the nature of God, and it's understanding that the nature of God is not natural. That's monotheism. The following sense. The pagan world is a tremendous impulse, a tempting impulse, a great impulse. It's the following impulse that nature is great and nature is divine, and the forces of nature are extremely powerful, and the pagan impulse is an attempt to worship those forces by a very interesting move where nature goes, the different forces of nature go through personification. The ground, the ocean, the air, the lightning, the sky, all these forces of nature come to life in the pagan impulse. But it's more than that. All these forces of nature are alive and they're represented by gods. And there's a relationship between gods. And now, here's the revolution. Since all these gods are part of the natural order, therefore, the order of nature is imposed on them. They're limited to the natural law. Here's what monotheism is about. Monotheism is not about saying that God is one. Monotheism is about saying that God is beyond nature. He's not a part of the system. He's beyond the system. And because he's beyond the system, the laws of the system don't apply on him. So, for example, in the pagan world, there's life cycles, and the gods are born, and they mate, and they have children, and the whole pantheon is a one big family, and they die. By the way, then they wake up again, because that's how nature works. The interesting thing in the Bible is what we don't have in the Bible. We don't have what the Greeks call theogonia. We don't have stories about our God because he doesn't have any story. He's beyond the story. He's beyond nature. The laws of nature don't apply on him. He's beyond all that. But since he's beyond all that, since the laws of nature don't apply on him, what really happened here as a result, that monotheism is an attempt to empty nature from gods, from anything sacred. Here's an interesting way someone articulated this once, that monotheism is about secularizing nature. And since it's secularizing nature, that's why Zion... I was going to say something else. That's why monotheism is what paved the way to modern science. Because once nature is just this, it's not filled with mysterious forces. Once monotheism led to secularization of nature, we could start examining nature and understanding nature, which what leads to modern science. And here's an interesting paradox. When we say that God is beyond us, that God is other than us, that God is not a part of our system, He's beyond our system, we say He's transcendent. But that's not, the Bible doesn't use the word transcendent. The Bible didn't know the word transcendent. The Bible has another word that describes the absolute otherness of God. How God is completely beyond our system and not accessible to us. The Bible has another word. You know what that word is? Kadosh. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Rav Soloveitchik translates that famous verse from Isaiah, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melo Kol Haaretz Kvodo. Translate this, transcendent, transcendent, transcendent. Beyond, beyond, beyond. Other, other, other. In Hebrew, being holy means being the absolute other. No, maybe somebody's trying to censor what I'm saying. But here's an interesting paradox. If God is holy, now the holiness of God, the fact He's completely transcendent, was experienced, Maimonides took that to the next level. Because if the biblical revolution meant that God is beyond nature, Maimonides picked up on this and took this to the next level. He said, not only beyond nature, also beyond language. And it was important for Maimonides to declare that God is beyond language, is because that's the only real way to make sure that God is not a part of this world. And here's why. Now, this is the foundation of Maimonidean philosophy. Here's why. Because you see, language is what we all use to describe the world. We use language to describe the world. And once I use language, the thing I use to describe the world, to describe God, that turns God into a part of this world. Language puts world and God in the same category. Let's say we say God is good. Well, you see, what's the name of that very good person in India? Mother Teresa. She was good. She's a very good person. The Baal Shem Tov, he was a very good person. I have a very good friend. His name is Dani. He's a very good person. Oh, God is also very good. No, but you see what we mean? He's much more. He's like, but even if Mother Teresa is good and God is extremely good, all I'm saying is that God and Mother Teresa are in the same category, and God is more of the same thing. Kadosh means that it's not the same thing. It's not the same category. And Maimonides understood, in order to make sure that the world and God are not in the same category, we can't use language to describe Him. Therefore, ultimately, the only thing we can do with God is to be silent. Maimonides, in that sense, in my reading, completing the biblical monotheistic revolution of establishing the ultimate otherness of God, which takes us to the following paradox. Oh, before the paradox, by the way, when you say Kaddish, what do you say? When you say we all know the Kaddish. We say about God that He's le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata ushbechata de'amira. He's beyond compliments, beyond words. So the only thing you could say about God is we're expressing in Kaddish the paradox. What we're saying about God is we're mentioning the fact that we can't say anything about God. That's what you're saying. We're saying that we can't say le'ila min kol birchata, and as a result, again, everything is secularized. Everything is empty from God. Because if God is beyond this world, so this world is secularized. Which the paradox is that the more God is holy, the more this world is secular. The more God is kadosh, holy, the more this world is ours. Which takes me to the second biblical revolution. By the way, if this is am I bombing you with too much? So slow me down. Yeah. Okay. They say I don't understand. I'll say Zionism again. We'll have a comic relief. Okay. Okay. What? So, yeah. And the second revolution is the following. If God is completely other than nature, and according to my mind, he's other than language, so our relationship with nature is transformed. And here's a second aspect of paganism. Paganism was always about magic. Now, what is magic about? Magic is about, certain anthropologists try to explain this, like Fraser and others, is that magic is about control. It's always been about control. It's about control. It's the attempt, maybe the real attempt, maybe an illusion of an attempt of mankind to have control over nature. And this is how the control work. Magic, the world of magic assumes, as Fraser explains, that there are centers of power in the cosmos. There are centers of power in nature. And certain people, very certain people, the magicians, the priests, the shamans, they have access to these centers of power. Why do they have access to these centers of power? Because they have the knowledge that enables them to tap in to those centers of power. Now, there's different types of magical techniques. Just give you one example. There's the magia astralit. There's the, try to translate that, the astron in Greek is a star. So, I guess astral magic, maybe I'm not violating the language. Yeah, astral magic is about assuming that the stars have energy, and there's some people that know how to capture that energy, bring him into their world, and to use that energy to manipulate nature. אני בסדר. I'm a singer. I'm not actually. אבל אתה מסתדר עם כן, סבבה. So there's different techniques, like there's certain, for example, objects that you use to capture the energy from the stars. And those objects are almost always isomorphic objects, meaning their objects have the same geometric structure of the stars. And if I can create the right geometric structure of the star and I put it in the right time in front of the star, it will capture the energy of the star. For example, what is the energy of Mars? We all know what energy that has. It's the energy of war. And if I could capture the energy of Mars using the right object, the right isomorphic object that has the right geometric, now I'm teaching you guys magic tricks, to using the right structure that could capture the energy of Mars, I could use that to be king, to be powerful, to win. That's what we do. Now, there's different forms of magic. There's homeopathic magic and there's imitative magic. For example, they believe that there's a certain dance that you do that imitates the result of rain. Like a dance that you do that imitates the noises of frogs. Because after rain, there's frogs. I'm serious now. You do a dance that imitates the noise of frogs, and by imitating the result of rain, you create rain. Very interesting, different forms of magic. The world is filled with different attempts of magic. But what is magic about? Magic is about power. And as David Shulman writes, and other people write, the process of magic is always the same process. It's the following process. You do a few things. It's a dance or something you say or an object that you create at the right structure at the right time. And once you do it, it has to work. It has to work. I guess David Shulman writes, what happens if you did everything and it didn't rain? You did everything you had to do, Everything. It was a sophisticated ceremony. You did everything, and it doesn't rain. You did it wrong. Do it. That's right. So something in the process. So you see, we know what we need to do in order to have control. Magic is about control. And if there's not results, it's because I didn't do the ritual correctly. That's what magic is about. And I'd like to now, here's what happens in monotheism. Once God is holy and nature is secular, so nature is empty from those pockets of power. We don't believe they exist anymore. And as a result, not only did nature change, also we changed. Because the world of magic vanishes. And your ability to control nature vanishes. No more magic tricks. No more rituals. Suddenly, as a result, what monotheism really is about is experiencing yourself extremely small. Experiencing yourself not as powerful, but as powerless. And one of the meanings, that doesn't mean that we don't try to approach God. But we have now the birth of a new idea. The alternative to magic is prayer. Now, what's the fundamental difference between magic and prayer? The fundamental difference between magic and prayer is the following: that magic is an act of power and prayer is an expression of being powerless. I learned this personally. I don't want to say a date. I think it was 95. Maybe 95. So we're talking 17 years ago. 17 years ago, I remember Erev Shabbat when Nachshon Wachsman was kidnapped by the Hamas. You remember that? When our soldier Nachshon Wachsman, y'all remember that? And I remember he was kidnapped by the Hamas, and I remember that his mother, his amazing mother, Esther Wachsman, asked people to go to the Kotel and to say Tehillim, say Psalm for his son Nachshon. So I remember that Friday night going to the Kotel. I'm sure you were all there also in thoughts, and you remember that night? Yeah. So we go to the Kotel, and we're saying Psalms, and I remember tens of thousands of Israelis in the Kotel saying Psalm, and everybody, there was a sense that this is going to work. This is going to work. So much energy, so many Jews in the Kotel saying Tehillim. This is going to work. That sense that if we're doing it right, it will happen, that's not praying. What is that? That's a definition of magic. Yehuda Wachsman's, Nachshon Wachsman's father, is a true monotheist. He's one of the first one that taught me a lesson in monotheism. That evening, the tragedy happened. Our elite forces, Sayeret Matkal, tried to rescue Nachshon Wachsman. While they did, so we lost a soldier and Nachshon Wachsman. There was a funeral the next day, and a reporter goes up. Israeli reporters don't have a lot of tact sometimes. And they go to the father of Nachshon Wachsman saying, don't you have like a crisis now in your belief system? So many people prayed, and you didn't get an answer. And this is what Yehuda Wachsman said. And this was my first lesson in monotheism, and Zionism, by the way. He said, we did get an answer. The answer was no. We did get an answer. You see, that's the fundamental difference between magic and prayer. Prayer assumes that the power is in God's hands. Magic assumes that the power is in your hands. That's the radical biblical revolution. That magic is about, if I'll do it right, it will work. It will happen. Prayer is about, you always get an answer. But the answer could be no, because if you do it right and the answer has to be yes, that means you own the power, and actually that means who's the God. If you'll just do it right, everything will happen. That's what's so tempting about the world of magic. If I'll put the mezuzah right, and I'll go to the right rabbi, and I'll say the right mantra, and things will happen. That illusion of power, if I'll just do it right. So the uncertainty that we have in this world will disappear. The anxiety that comes, that uncertainty will disappear. That's the temptation. That monotheism is not about overcoming that anxiety and that uncertainty. It's about accepting it. I think we've done enough work conceptually now, trying to understand what is magic, what is monotheism, and what is prayer. I wanted to establish all that before we dive into the main text I want to read with you today, where we're going to practice using these terms, and it's an amazing text which might challenge everything I said, which might prove that we have magic in the heart of our Bible. And I want to read with you Kings 2, chapter 5, and I think you all have the text now. Nachon? You have the text. But before we dive into the text, I see there's some questions. I'll pick up the questions now, and then we'll go into the text. Bevakasha, just mention your name. Maybe we'll take the mic. So, תביא לו את המיקרופון כדי ש...
Jack Berger. Is there a difference between magic and miracle? Because 36 years ago today, there was absolutely a miracle. It's called Entebbe.
Today's Entebbe.
Today's Entebbe.
Great. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll tell you what the difference between magic and miracle is. There's a psychological difference. A miracle is experienced as an intervention from outside. Magic is experienced as an expression of your own power. That's the fundamental difference. Paro's magicians versus Moshe and Aaron. They both turn a stick into a snake. So what's the difference? They're experiencing it as an extension of their own power. Moshe is experiencing it as he's obeying to what God said. It's just about God's power. He doesn't know how that even happens. So it's a question if it's your muscles or it's from beyond you. Sometimes the difference between magic and miracle is, see, what I'm trying to say is, chapter 1 in Genesis, it describes the birth of monotheism. That God is the ultimate other. That God is not part of nature. And establishes that, by the way, in verse 1 in Genesis. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created, am I saying right? Yeah. The heaven and the earth. In the beginning. Well, once you say he created the heavens and the earth, what's the statement there? That he's not a part of this system. He's not a part of the heavens and the earth. That's a revolution in the question, who is God? But in there, there's another revolution. It's a revolution of who is man. When I say man, I mean humanity. That transformed who we are. Because when you change the way you understand, there's certain ideas that once they change, everything changes. Then there's some ideas that once they change, only that changes. That's the difference. So I don't want to go with philosophy now, between ideas that are foundational and ideas that are accidental. But so obviously, yeah, bevakasha.
Eric, why isn't knowledge the alternative to magic rather than prayer?
Can you just explain your question? Because I don't understand it.
Well, magic is sort of it's based on some direct control that you have without understanding what's going on, without truly understanding what's going on in nature. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is the attempt to understand nature in terms of its natural laws, in terms of observable facts. Call it science if you want. But just general understanding about how things work in nature. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the alternative to magic rather than, or another alternative?
Well, I would say the following. It's exactly that. Once nature is secularized, then we could start having real knowledge about it. There's no mystery there. Now we could just try to examine it, which leads to knowledge. Right? Yeah. But then if we go now into that religious talent that we're speaking about, how's that expressed? So my argument, not only does actually, if you think about it, in light of what I said, that the religious talents is not threatened by monotheism, because there's no more mystery in this world that's secularized. The secularization of nature is what cultivates that. Because now, if I'm searching for anything, It's in what's beyond my control. It's what's beyond my power. It's not about being absorbed in my power. That talent is born when you, on those moments where you see yourself as being powerless. Now you could be, when it comes to this world, knowledgeable, and when it comes to religious moments, feeling powerless. And I don't think that those two impulses necessarily contradict each other. Rabbi.
So, Micah, I'm a little confused because you say that God is kadosh, which is other, but the Torah's central category here is kadoshim to you.
Mm-hmm.
Kadosh on the other hand. We should be other like God. So that would seem to contradict. If God is radically other, why does the Torah command us to be radically other like us?
No, it's an amazing question. Amazing question. He asks, if God is the ultimate other, if God is kadosh, so how is it possible that the Torah is commanding us to be kadosh? Rashi's answer is the following. You should separate yourself from this world. Bushim to you. So imitating God's ultimate otherness might create relative otherness. That's Rashi's explanation. Okay. Okay, no, it's a.
I don't mean to digress the class.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the attractiveness of magic, and we have many magic now also, its power to control other powers, they are bigger than us, but I think the basic is afraid. Because these powers are so strong, they kill us, nature. So this is experience.
That's right.
So the basic impulse is afraid of death. How can we survive?
That's right. I agree with you. This is what creates magic. The illusion of control is the anxiety of having absolutely no control.
Because it's a question, how do you accept death in this life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We all know that
Mhm.
people will die.
Mhm.
How can you live up and accept without trying to manage it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yanai, now you mentioned something about how you place a mezuzah and how that influences your life. Religious life seems to be invaded or permeated by magic concepts all the time because what you talk about rituals, so people sometimes get very obsessed with rituals. So
Okay.
that's a permanent.
Okay, I'll tell you my understanding. My understanding is exactly that. My understanding is the following. Religion at its worst gives you an illusion of control and certainty. Religion at its best enables you to accept uncertainty and your lack of control. And I think both, and I don't think that there's a religion that does that and a religion that does that. All religions have both impulses, and I would say even more than that, in every religious moment, we have both. We have both. What was that evening in the Kotel? What was that? Was that expression of being omnipotent, powerful, we're trying to control what's going to happen now, or an expression of being weak and powerless? And that was the great and noble way to channel those emotions. What was that moment in the Kotel? I think it was both. I think every great religious moment has both, and there's a temptation of being power, and and I think it's true that the challenge of really of being an athlete is trying to shake off the magical temptation that is always attached to religion. Rabbi.
So, my mother's on the operating table, and I go up to the Torah, and I make a mishabera. God, please heal her. Is that religion at its best, religion at its worst?
Depends. Depends on the person. There's a Gemara in Traktat Rosh Hashanah that answers you. Gemara in Traktat Rosh Hashanah says the following. I'm probably not quoting it right. אלה שלושה דברים שמקצרין חיה. There's three things. שמזכירין עוונותיו של אדם. There are three things that remind God of your sins. Okay? Like what you have to do for God to Oh, Wes, okay. To remind him of your sins. So here's what they are. Okay. Ha'omer al chavero, meaning, hamaskir avonotav shel chavero, meaning, you're praying and you're telling God about the sins of the guy praying next to you. If you do that, so suddenly God remembers your sins. A second thing is kir natui, meaning if there's a building that's about to collapse and you have the Hebrews to rock right next to it, that reminds God of your sins. Why would that remind God of your sins? Because if you're going right beneath a wall that's shaky, so God might say, oh, here's an opportunity. And the third thing is iyun tefillah, a certain kind of davening, of praying. What is iyun tefillah? Rashi says like this: Ha'omer, hayodeh shetfilato titkabel lefi shene'emra bechavana. A person that says, had such great kavanah, such great concentration in this tefillah, therefore I know with absolute certainty it will be accepted. That's iyun tefillah, and that's in the same category of the person who tells on his friend and the person who goes beneath a shaky wall. This sounds very weird, but I want to think about this again. What is iyun tefillah according to the categories we've just established? That I said the tefillah correctly, said the Misha Berach, and I was focusing, and now my mother's going to heal. If I have that understanding, that was an expression of power, that's magic. I healed her. I healed her. I said the words in the right way. I healed her. What's the common denominator between what we just called iyun tefillah and speaking about the sins of your neighbor and walking beneath a kir natui? It's all hubris. If I'm speaking about his sins, I feel like I have no sins. When I'm walking beneath, it won't happen to me. I'm immune. That sense that you're immune, that sense that you're powerful, that sense that you're beyond everything, that's all the same sin. So my answer to you, Rabbi West, is that if you feel that now you're curing her, that's magic. If you feel like you're asking God to cure her, that's tefillah. Yes.
There's a difference between wanting to use prayer to affect specific outcomes in life, and then the question of finding your individual life meaningful, things you do.
Yep.
As part of this greater cosmos that God created.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question goes to, if you accept powerlessness,
Mm-hmm.
how do you still find meaning in your individual life?
Okay, that's a big question. I'll tell you what I want to ask you all. We can continue this Q&A or we can do the text. I don't think we'll be able to do both because we have 35 minutes. So are you okay? Because I don't want to be too powerful here. So you're okay with being powerless now? You're okay, okay. Thanks, man.
Except now I have no meaning in my life.
That's too much responsibility for me.
You'll find meaning in the text.
Okay, so we've established three categories: what prayer is, what magic is, what monotheism is, and actually what paganism is. We tried to establish these four categories, and hopefully we understand them better now. Before we dive into this text, I wanted one more category. It's a more technical category. It's about, and we'll have to do this quicker than I said. That it's okay. I just want to. What is tzara'at, leprosy, about? Leprosy. This is what we're going to go into now. Now, leprosy, according to the sages, what do you get leprosy for? Lashon hara. Meaning if you speak badly about someone, you get leprosy. Isn't that interesting? There is an explanation. Some people say it's connected to Rabbi Nachman Mibreslev, that when you speak badly about someone else behind his back, and you do lashon hara, that means you're seeing only his external parts of his personality. You're seeing him or her externally. What's interesting about leprosy is that where does it hit you? In the epidermis. It's an external disease. A direct result of the way you see the world, if you see it externally. And what is the therapy to tzarat? It's very interesting. The therapy is the following. The priest tells you to leave the camp where people are, to go outside of the camp, michutz lamachaneh, for 7 days. Badad yeshev michutz lamachaneh. You have to be isolated. No interaction with human beings for 7 days, which is very interesting. Because your sin was the sin that always happens to people. Lashon hara is a result of human interaction. When you think you have this slight ego trip, by putting someone down, you feel for 5 minutes a little bit elevated. And that temptation of lashon hara, which is always a result of human, that I feel value only in relation to someone else, the way to overcome that temptation, the therapy is to be isolated for 7 days to understand myself, my own value, not in relation to others, but only in relation to myself. And after that happens, you come back. This is an interesting explanation of Rabbi Nachman. You come back into the machaneh. That's why Rabbi Nachman says, I don't know why I'm going to Rabbi Nachman, but I'll just stay there for a minute. Rabbi Nachman says that being a little bit isolated is very therapeutic. And Rabbi Nachman, Mibreslev, his advice is that every person should be alone for 1 hour every day. To see yourself, not in relation to others, but to see yourself directly. Very interesting. We forgot to tell you that Machon Hartman is also a Breslev Institute. We're trying to promote. Okay. That's very interesting. It's my understanding, and I'm saying this modestly, that that's not the sin that creates leprosy in the Bible. Lashon hara doesn't, and I have a lot of respect, as I said, for this reading, doesn't quite nail it textually. We have 3 examples, actually 4, for people who got leprosy. I want to think about it for a minute. One was, we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to go through it. One was Miriam. I'll go to Miriam in the end. One was Yerovam ben Nevat. Yerovam ben Nevat, to remind you, it's a champion from Kings 1, from Kings Volume 1. After Solomon dies, Yerovam rebels against Rechavam, his Solomon's son, and separates the kingdom into Yehudah and Israel. The southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. He separates the kingdom. And he creates his own independence, sovereignty over the 10 tribes of the north. And he does more than that. Not only does he declare the independence of the north from the south, he establishes a new religion with 2 ritual points. One in Beit El, that's the southern part of the northern kingdom. And the second one where? In Dan, that's the northern part of the northern kingdom. And not only, meaning creating an alternative to Jerusalem, but not only does he create new sacred space, he creates new sacred time. He says our sacred month is the 8th month. What's our sacred month? Tishrei, the 7th month. And not only does he create new alternative sacred space and alternative sacred time, he creates alternative sacred people. He says the people that will serve in these temples are not the Kohanim, but people that I will appoint. Meaning, he's not only did he establish a new kingdom, he established a new religion, and then he takes all this to the next level, and he declares himself the priest of that religion. And the moment he gets leprosy was the moment where he is the priest in his own temple. And suddenly he realizes that his entire hand is stuck because it has leprosy. Why did Yerovam ben Nevat get leprosy? Let's hold that thought and move to another person who got leprosy. His name was Uzziah. Uzziah was one of the most successful kings in the history of Yehuda. He was in the southern kingdom of Yehuda. Are you following me? Is this too quick? It's okay? We're fine? Good. So he's one of the most successful kings. And he was successful. And it says he's Gibor Chayil. He's extremely successful. And he builds the walls of Jerusalem. And then he appoints himself to be a priest. Bang, gets leprosy. Let's go to Miriam. Miriam says, "Ach, b'Moshe diber Hashem, halo gam banu diber." She says to her brother, Moses has prophecy. Also, we have prophecy, meaning we're in the same spiritual level of Moses. Bang, she gets leprosy. What's leprosy about? Leprosy happens when you think that you're more than who you are. Leprosy happens the following process. Leprosy in the Bible is the disease of the winners. It's always a result. It's when you're psychologically damaged because of your success. When you're the victim of your own success in the following sense. Yerovam manages to be the king, and he's so successful, and he's blinded, doesn't see his weaknesses, his boundaries. He knows who he is, and he forgets what he's not. And he thinks he's a priest. His success makes him forget his boundaries. He thinks he's more than what he really is. Bang, he gets leprosy. Uzziah, successful. Extremely successful as a result of his success. And this is, I think, we have this metaphor in Hebrew. I think we have this in English. When you're blinded by your success. What do you think that you're blinded? When you're blind, you're so successful, you can't see. What can't you see? You can't see your vulnerabilities anymore. You can't see your weakness anymore. You can't see your limitations anymore. You think that you're something that you're not. You think that you're more than who you are. The same thing happened with Miriam. She has spiritual success. She has prophecy. But she interprets herself, if I have prophecy, so what am I? I'm in the level of Moshe. Bang, she gets it's my understanding. Hubris, the way the Greeks understand it, is the following, is that you have success. And as a result of your success, you have an inflated dimui atzmi, self-image. Yeah? So your self-image is inflated. The image of power that you have grows so much, it's much greater than the amount of power that you actually have. And that asymmetry between the amount of power that I actually have and the inflated image and the image of power that I think I have, that leads me to do things and create policies and actions not in light of my real power, but in light of the image of my power. And as a result, I lose all my power. That's when Napoleon goes into Russia. Why does he go into Russia? Because he was so successful. Hubris is when you become the victim of your own success. The biblical version of this is that when you're very successful and you think you're more than who you are, what leprosy does is it exposes you to your weakness, to your vulnerability, to your lack of control, and it happens right in that moment that you think that you have all the control. Okay, now we've established the last category that will enable us to read the text. There's only one problem. There's no more time to read the text. So have a nice day. I'm just joking. Let's try to give it. What's our time now? What's the real time now? Oh, we have a lot. Oh, we can do many texts. Okay. So we'll do this tips. We'll do this text together. Od microphone? Okay, since I don't know how to read in English, so I'll ask someone else to read. I'm a limited person. I'm saying that because I don't want to have leprosy. Who wants to help me out with reading out loud? Who has like a divine voice? You want to help me? Thank you. Toda raba. You're reading the Bible, so it has to sound like God.
Oi. feminine voice.
That sounds like God.
Is this on? Yeah. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Aram, was a great man and his master, and held in esteem because of him. The Lord had given victory unto Aram. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper.
Let's stop here for a minute. I think we know enough to understand this verse. He was a man of victory. He was a gibor chayil. He brought the Aramim tremendous victories. He's a winner. And then he says he has leprosy. And I think we already know enough to understand what happened here. It's not that he was a great general, that so many victories, and he was a leper. But what's a stronger way to read this verse? Therefore, he couldn't. Leprosy happens when you can't deal with your success. Where you, actually, I would say a better way to think about it is where your success defines you. It's not something that happened to you, it's who you are. By the way, the exact opposite happens to us sometimes in failure. When you fail a few times, what might happen to someone is they don't see yourself as, I failed, failure, something that happened to me. You start, you see yourself as a failure. You identify with what happened to you. That's the opposite of hubris. But now let's stay with the hubris, please.
And the Arameans had gone out in bands and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, would that my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria. There would he recover him of his leprosy. And he went in and told his Lord, saying, thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Aram said, go now, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 pieces of gold and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, and now, when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy?
Let me stop here for a minute. So how do they understand leprosy? Let's try to think more. The only person that could repair leprosy is God. Am I God? And furthermore, lehamito leachayot. How does he understand leprosy? To cure someone from leprosy is just like reviving, resurrecting someone that's dead. So leprosy is a form of death. And curing leprosy is resurrecting how do you say that? The dead. And only God can do that. So how does the king understand what the king of Aram is doing to him? He's asking him a favor. He obviously will fail, and because he failed, he's thinking he's setting him up. That's how he understands it. Please.
But consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh an occasion against me. And it was so, when Elisha the man of God heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him now come to me. He shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariots, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come back to thee, and thou shalt be clean.
Okay, let me stop here. So let's try to understand the situation. Elisha tells the king, send him to me, I'll cure. No problem. Send him to me. Leprosy is no problem for me. I'll cure. Let's think about it. If not, in light of our categories, if Elisha thinks that he could cure leprosy, what does that make Elisha? Someone who deserves leprosy. If he thinks he's omnipotent, he's God, he can cure leprosy, then so how can we start understanding the behavior of Elisha? Why can he cure him? Okay, so we have this general that we know that has very high self-esteem. He's a winner, he's successful, he's a general. And he comes, and what does Elisha do to him? Let's try to read this. Can you please read that verse again so we can picture that image of the interaction between Elisha and Naaman?
Okay, from 9.
Yeah.
So Naaman comes with his horses and his chariots and stood in the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come back to thee, and thou shalt be clean.
Okay, what did Elisha do to him? The general just came to his house, and what didn't Elisha do? He didn't come to see him. He sent his servant. He sent his messenger. And then what didn't the messenger do? He didn't cure him. He commanded him to do something. Now, if we understand the psyche of Naaman, how is he going to react to the fact that Elisha didn't come out to him, sent a messenger, didn't cure him, but he gave him an order. He gave the general an order. Generals that don't have leprosy have problems with this. Actually, most adults have issues with getting orders. Even people that aren't, overflowing with hubris. So how does Naaman react to this? Continue reading.
So Naaman was wroth and went away and said, Behold, I thought, he will surely come out to me.
He will come out to me. He will come out to me. So now Naaman is frustrated. He's leaving. He's leaving. He's getting on his horse and he's leaving. Continue.
And stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hands over the place and recover the leper.
Okay, what did Naaman expect is going to happen? Magic, which means I'm powerful, you're my servant, you will cure me, and it will end. What we have here is a clash of cultures. Naaman coming from a pagan culture, meaning Elisha coming from which is a different type of an athlete, coming from a whole different culture. And he tells her, and so when Naaman is frustrated, Elisha didn't come to me, and he didn't say a holy name, put his hand on me, say you're cured, no more leprosy. Elisha didn't do that. Instead, he tells me to go. And where does he tell me to go? To the Jordan River. Now, we have to imagine Jordan River is not what it is today, this whole mythical thing. It's just, the Jordan River is so not impressive for Americans. If you had a river like that in America, you probably wouldn't even name it. It doesn't have a name. It's like, water. Here in Israel, it's the river. It's our river. It's like, you have the Rhine in Europe and the Nile and the Mississippi, and we have that's not even, it's a nothing. Yeah. So now he's even more humiliated. What is his humiliation?
Are not Amanah and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel?
Yeah, it says, so your solution is for me to go into that puddle? I could go to the rivers of Damascus, so he's geographically humiliated. And he is personally humiliated because Elisha didn't come to him, and obviously he is terribly humiliated because instead of offering him service, he gives him an order. So there's a triple humiliation. And Naaman, and who does he humiliate? The person who thinks he's God and that and he doesn't, someone should shake off my leprosy so I could go on with my life. So he's about to leave, and then his servants stop Naaman. And what do they say to him?
And his servants came near and spoke unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he saith to thee, Wash and be clean? Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the sayings of the man of God. And his flesh came back like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean.
Beautiful. What happened here? What happened to Naaman? What happened? Elisha doesn't go out to him. He sends a servant. He doesn't cure him. He orders him. He doesn't send him to the Mississippi. He sends him to the puddle. Now here's Naaman. If he could swallow his ego, listen to the servants, accept an order, go to the Jordan, what happens to him there? He's overcoming what gave him leprosy. You see, Naaman thought he's coming for magic, but what he got was therapy. Naaman thought that Elisha will cure him, but what he didn't realize that the only person that can cure Naaman is himself. It's himself. Hubris of leprosy is about, I'm omnipotent, I own the power. He has to realize that there's a power beyond him. This is the clash of cultures that I think this chapter so beautifully described. It seems like, and I heard too many readings of this chapter that it's about magic. It's not about magic. It's a critique of magic. It's a spiritual alternative to magic. This is monotheism. Excuse me, Zionism. No, I'm serious. No, actually, this is a very interesting Freudian slip because this is exactly national hubris is exactly the challenge of Zionism. Now I'm trying to cure all my slips altogether. I think without going to with that's an interesting with going to the Jordan. If you think about it nationally, one of the reasons for the failure of 1973, the surprise attack of Yom Kippur, we were the victims of the ego trip that nationally we had, the 6-Day War, assuming that the Arabs are nothing, they'll never attack us. That's a beautiful case of metaphoric leprosy, that you have an image that's greater than what you really are as a result of your success. The story doesn't end here. Let's continue.
And he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and came and stood before him and said, Behold now, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, take a present of thy servant. But he said, And the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. And
okay, so I want to stop you. Why can't Elisha accept payment for his service? Because he didn't do it. And now think of it. If he accepts payment, so what is he expressing? That he cured him from leprosy. And if he thinks that he in his power cured him from leprosy, he'll get leprosy. I have a new phone, actually. I don't know how to turn off. I'm sorry. You know these new...
Flip on the side, there's a little lever. I'll do it for you.
Well, I have... Oh, forget it. Can you just turn this off? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's this new thing that someone... Yeah. This is magic, by the way. So what?
How does God get inside the phone?
Just don't open in the door.
What? Yeah, that's right. No, the fact that we could speak long distance on small objects, and see each other, all that stuff, that's... No, Fraser, by the way, says that the best way to imagine magic is as technology, meaning technology is an attempt to control nature, and Fraser says the only difference between magic and technology is much better. No, seriously. Magicians can, with their mind, pick their bodies off the ground. But with science, we can cross the Atlantic Ocean. Science is much more advanced than magic ever was. I'm serious. Much more advanced. And therefore, science can create hubris. And therefore these challenge to our religious talent is even greater in a time of these things. Although for me, it creates a humble experience. That's just... He's reacting to my compliments.
Saying amen.
There's other puddles around very close. You want to continue?
And Naaman said, if not yet, I pray thee, let there be given to thy servant 2 mules' burden of earth. For thy servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offerings nor sacrifice unto other gods, but unto the Lord. In this thing the Lord pardon thy servant, when my master goeth into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leaneth on my hand, and I prostrate myself in the house of Rimmon. When I prostrate myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon thy servant in this thing. And he said unto him, Go in peace. So he departed from him some way. Continue?
Yeah, I get it. This is where it gets interesting.
But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, Behold, my master hath spared this Naaman the Aramean in not receiving at his hands that which he brought, as the Lord liveth. I will surely run after him and take somewhat of him. So Gehazi followed after Naaman, and when Naaman saw one running after him, he alighted from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master hath sent me, saying, Behold, even now there are come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Give them, I pray thee, a talent of silver and 2 changes of raiment. And Naaman said, Be content, take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags and 2 changes of raiment and laid them upon 2 of his servants, and they bore them before him. And when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and deposited them in the house, and he let the men go, and they departed. But he went in and stood before his master. And Elisha said unto him, Whence comest thou, Gehazi? And he said, Thy servant went no whither. And he said unto him, Went not my heart with thee when the man turned back from his chariot to meet thee? Is it a time to receive money and to receive garments and olive yards and vineyards and sheep and oxen and manservants and maidservants? The leprosy, therefore, of Naaman still clings unto thee, and unto thy shall cleave unto thee and unto thy seed forever. And he went out from the presence of a leper as white as snow.
Thank you so much for reading for us.
You didn't tell me it was biblical English.
No, thank you. It's what happened here? Elisha didn't want to get paid. As we said, the paradox before, if he gets paid, that's expressing that it was he that cured him. And the entire therapy, let's just think about it. The entire therapy that Naaman had to go through is understanding that we don't own power. Only when he recognizes that he is not powerful, then he can cure himself from the Hebrews that created the leprosy. Therefore, Elisha can't, if Elisha thinks that he was the one who cured him, he is God, he has those muscles, those talents, those abilities. Therefore, so Elisha can't make that declaration. But his servants feels like they missed out big. So he runs after him and he makes up his story and he tells him, listen, we changed our mind and we want you to pay us. And he pays him and he comes back. And Elisha tells him, not that now he shall have leprosy. He tells him something worse. He tells him that the leprosy of Naaman is going to be carried now by him. Now the leprosy just changed to a new location. And why does he need the leprosy of Naaman? Because if he takes credit for curing leprosy, he deserves leprosy. Because if he thinks that it was them, we deserve it, it was our power, that create, and it's not fair that we don't get paid. Therefore, the moment of curing leprosy was a moment that created hubris, paradoxically, in his soul that led to that leprosy. I think this is an amazing chapter. And I'm glad we managed to read the whole thing. And please hold on to this chapter. This is your chapter from now on. Read it. And I think through this chapter, I think we notice that part of the biblical revolution of saying that God is beyond nature, that also means that the ability that if the gods aren't here, centers of power aren't here, that the control is not in our hands, it's beyond us. And monotheism is also is a humbling human experience. And with one insight to our world, the impulse of worshiping your success, and your success blinding you and hiding your vulnerabilities and your weaknesses is always there. The 20th century, in a deep sense, is a story of not seeing our own limitations. But in the Middle Ages, it wasn't people admiring their ability to control nature. It was about nations and civilizations admiring the ability to control other people. It's much more like the Kasdim. If we think about China and Spain and, well, Russia and all the bad stuff that happened. If we think about civilizations that, let's say, like Nazi Germany, Russia, Stalin in Russia, Mao in China, 20th century was about civilizations worshiping their own power, blinded by their own success, not seeing their own vulnerabilities. And this is why I think monotheism is a very powerful idea, because as we see in this chapter, it's also a therapeutic idea. It's a therapeutic idea. Asking Leo Strauss's question, not what do ideas mean, but what do ideas do? What do ideas do to us? That's a big question. What does monotheism do to us? And maybe in a nutshell, monotheism is not about thinking you're meaningless and powerless and you can't control anything. Jews always believed that they could have an impact on this world. But monotheism is maybe something a little bit different. And I want to think about this one last time in the 2.5 minutes we have left for this lecture. When we think about admiring our power, many times it comes in the following form, like in the 20th century. We admire our ideas. Now, here's how it looks like when you admire your idea and you idealize your idea. A few people think about an idea like socialism, like liberalism, like Zionism. And you think this idea is such a great idea that it's a redeeming idea, meaning if we will just implement this idea, the world will radically change and it will be redeemed. Now you believe that an idea can redeem the world, which is the dominant belief of the 20th century, that there are ideas, there's a competition between ideas, but there's an idea out there that we can only articulate and implement, it will change the world and redeem the world. That's forgetting one thing. Who thought about these ideas? Human beings. Therefore, idealizing an idea is an extension of idealizing mankind, yourself. In other words, I think the best way to understand idolatry is the following. Idolatry happens when you take yourself too seriously. It's about taking yourself too seriously. You know what? Monotheism is about having a sense of humor. I'm not joking. It's about having a sense of humor, but in the Jewish way, understanding of sense of humor. Jewish understanding of sense of humor means not like someone wrote once, it's not about me getting a laugh out of mocking you. Jewish sense of humor is always me making everybody laugh. But the joke is obviously on whom? It's always about me. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't take ourselves, that we shouldn't have ideas. That's the radical reaction to all this postmodernism. No, we're afraid of big ideas. We're afraid of big thoughts. I'm saying is, I think the Bible and our tradition is trying to promote something in the middle. It's the following thing. We should have ideas. We should promote ideas, but we should also not take them that seriously. We should have a sense of humor. It's about a small wink. By the way, I I'm a Zionist. But with a sense of humor. In the sense, I think Zionism is a great idea. I don't think it's going to redeem the world. It's a great idea. It's not perfect. It's an amazing project. It has problems. What? It's a great idea and has problems, and still, I'm a Zionist. It's not an all or nothing game that either ideas are meaningless or are redeeming. And I think taking ourselves, but I think promoting with the world, but at the same time not taking yourself too seriously. That's what Gehazi didn't understand. He took himself so seriously. That's what Ne'eman couldn't understand. He took himself so seriously, and that talent that is religion is an attempt to try to sometimes create moments of kedusha, of sacred in our lives that we could a little bit escape ourselves. Sometimes that happens. I hope this was helpful. Toda rabah.